My name is Elisabeth Ólafsdóttir and I'm an officer in the Internal Market Division at the EFTA Secretariat. I cover internal market policy more horizontally and industrial policy. And this morning you have learned about the practical steps for what the EEA agreement is and how EU law becomes EEA law, etc. But me and my colleagues at the Secretariat also monitor closely what is happening on the EU side. And this year is quite a special one for us, as Ásdís was just mentioning, in several different ways. First of all, and most importantly, the EEA agreement turned 30. Secondly, we had EU elections and are eagerly waiting for a new College of Commissioners to kick their work off. But finally, this is the year where the future of the internal market has been at the center of the debates in Brussels. We can say that we are at a turning point in terms of the internal market, and I will today share some perspectives with you on the past, present, and future, and how the EEA states are part of this reality. We sometimes tend to take this cooperation for granted, but when the world shakes, we really see the value of it. So let's go back 40 years. In 1985, the Commission presented a white paper on the internal market, which argued for pulling in the individual markets into one single market, without any restrictions and obstacles. This, of course, fueled a debate amongst the EFTA states on the effects that such an internal market would have on EFTA citizens and businesses, which then caused intensified discussions between the two parties, which concluded in 1993, when the EEA agreement was signed and then entered into force on the 1st of January 1994. So the EEA agreement has always aimed to allow for the full participation of the EEA EFTA states in the internal market. Since then, we have witnessed several different milestones for the EEA cooperation, which the younger generation in this room might take for granted. Citizens can move, study, and work freely within the EEA. They have been able to use a European health insurance card for 20 years already now. Everyday life of businesses has been simplified. The free movement of goods is secured through harmonized product requirements. EEA citizens also have unified passenger rights and consumer rights, and they have been able to roam like home since 2017. EEA citizens also have rights over its personal data, and of course, many have benefited from EU programs such as Horizon Europe and Erasmus+. It is important to bear in mind that these milestones have been equally beneficial for both parties to the EEA agreement, which is the most comprehensive agreement that the EU has entered into with any non-EU country. And Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein really are active contributors to the further development of the internal market. But the milestones I mentioned before were actually all reached before 2019. So let's now go back to that year and reflect on what happened then and in the years following. In 2019, Ursula von der Leyen took over as the president of the European Commission. There was lots of optimism in the air, and the European Green Deal and the Europe Fit for the Digital Age were announced. If I reflect on the EEA EFTA dimension here, our member states fully align with the EU's climate and digital objectives, and they share the same high ambitions as the EU. They are part of key policy frameworks to accelerate the green transformation, and are in the process of assessing and already starting to incorporate new legislative packages relating to the twin transitions. And here on the picture, you can see the EEA EFTA foreign ministers celebrating this continued commitment in light of the 30-year anniversary in a very nice spring event that we had. But there's always a but in this world today. I did say before that we have witnessed a shift in internal market policy in general. And this shift has been driven by crises such as COVID-19, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and global tensions in general linked to economic security and de-risking. The current geopolitical landscape has showed how fragile coordination within the internal market can actually be, with closing borders and fight for protective equipment during COVID. And it has also further brought attention to how dependent Europe is on items such as vaccines natural gas, semiconductors or chips, and critical raw materials like lithium, for instance, to produce batteries, and net zero manufacturing technologies like solar panels, which usually come from outside Europe. As a result, the EU has naturally been reacting to these crises quite intensively, with the aim of further developing the internal market to enhance Europe's competitiveness, reduce dependencies, and increase resilience. Throughout these crises, the EEA EFTA states have taken full part in the EU's reaction and therefore remain as committed partners. There was remarkable coordination when it came to COVID, maps, and vaccine passports during the pandemic. On actions relating to Ukraine, the EEA EFTA states have aligned with the EU in its response. I can take an example that Norway is now also participating in joint EU efforts to strengthen European ammunition production capacity and procurement through EU programs titled ASAP and EDIRPA. And as regards industrial initiatives, the EEA EFTA states are key partners to ensuring a competitive Europe fit for the future, as they have noted in some recent joint positions or EEA EFTA comments, which my colleague Trond will further explore with you. I can also mention that some of the EEA EFTA states are leading in net zero technologies on, for instance, carbon capture and storage, and in supplying raw materials needed for the future. We have the title here, Brussels in Transition. So what is actually next? I believe that in the very capable hands of our colleague from Politico to reflect more about sort of what are the trends that we will see most likely in the coming 5 years. But of course, the past has proven that this might change quite rapidly. But I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that a lot of debate is ongoing in Brussels on the future of the internal market. And this is a fact, and what the current geopolitical situation requires of policymakers as well. The EEA cooperation has worked very well for the past 30 years. And we at the Secretariat, I must say, are now quite good at adapting our work based on what suits our member states' interests at any given time. And the EEA EFTA states have, of course, been carefully analyzing the geopolitical situation and the now broad approach that the EU is taking when it comes to the internal market. They have underlined that any effort made at ensuring greater economic security and resilience should not result in the unwanted fragmentation of the internal market of 30 states. And since legislation with an effect on the internal market is now getting more cross-sectoral and overarching, the EFTA Standing Committee established a task force to look into this a year ago. And in their report this summer, they made it very clear that the original objective of the EEA agreements, which I recalled in the beginning of this presentation, remains the same and as valid as ever, creating a homogeneous internal market based on a level playing field. The achievements so far are to be celebrated. 14,000 acts have been incorporated into the EEA agreement since it was signed. The EEA EFTA states are already addressing common solutions together with the EU and are an integral part of the internal market and therefore its future. In the beginning, I reflected on the past and how much we take it for granted what we have now already achieved. Back in the day, and just like today, a lot of commitment is needed and will be needed. I will conclude my presentation here, and I hope it has been an insightful and a useful run-through in light of the 30-year anniversary of the EEA agreement. Thank you.